Alabama and Oklahoma. What kind of quarterback is Jalen Hurts going to be in his NFL career?
I usually trend negative on these things, but I actually think he's going to be pretty good. I really do. And the reason is multi-layered.
Tuesday edition of Birds 365 with the Mac guys, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. Yes, a lot of bird conversation, but also taking a look at the National Football League. We'll combine both of those things with our next guest. He's become a fairly regular guest on my CBS Sports Radio show. Does a great job whenever he hops on. I thought he'd give us a good perspective today on the birds from a national perspective and also talk some things in the NFL. Matt Verderame from Fansided.com. Good enough to hop aboard with us for a couple of minutes. How are you, Matty?
Doing good. How are you guys?
Good. Appreciate you coming on board. Right before you joined us, John and I were talking about Aaron Rodgers and his appearance last night on SportsCenter. I know the answer is a combination. That's what John just told me, and he's 99% right. But lean one way more or the other. Aaron Rodgers just being a good dude and a good friend and throwing a solid to Kenny Mayne, hopping on his last SportsCenter, or Aaron Rodgers had a reason to go on SportsCenter that he wanted to get a narrative out there about his situation with the Packers. Which of the two was more the motivation for him being on SportsCenter last night?
Oh, I think both, but certainly the latter, right? Like, I mean, yes, sure, likes Kenny Mayne, last show, all that, fine, fair enough. But the reality is he was more than happy to go on there and give a pretty good answer as to what's going on in Green Bay. If he didn't want to say anything there, he could have sidestepped that. And while he was pretty deft in the way he answered it, he also made it pretty clear, look, this is about the front office. This is about the Packers believing that they can pretty much plug and play somebody and it's going to work out as long as they go with the Packer way. And, of course, he doesn't believe that. And I don't blame him for not believing that. And I also don't blame the Packers to look at this thing and say, look, we've been really good for 30 years. It's not just you. Now, the reality is it's largely driven by him and by Brett Favre over that time. If they had a lesser quarterback there, it wouldn't matter who was around them. But Rodgers has had some great teammates over the years. That team that won the Super Bowl was a great team. And I just think Rodgers, look, I get the frustration, but I also think he should give credit to that organization, especially Mark Murphy, who's been there his entire career, for putting quite a bit around him over his 15-plus years in Green Bay.
It's about the people, man. That's what Aaron said. But obviously the culture, and look, he doesn't like the general manager. As you mentioned, Mark Murphy. The Packers have always been, the GM picks the players, the coach coaches the players play. I mean, that's the Packers are the most clearly defined personnel team in this league. And I agree with you in the fact that, look, Aaron wanted a receiver last year. He elevates receivers. They have put a great offensive line in front of them over the years. David Bakhtiari may have been a mid-round pick, but they've developed him. When you look at Aaron saying maybe you haven't done the best things, do you think that's fair to say for the Packers as a whole?
I really don't. And I've heard the conversation about, well, they haven't used a first-round pick on an offensive player other than Jordan Love in the last decade. And I get that. But they haven't had to. Like, a lot of the years he's been there, as you mentioned, they've used mid- and late-round picks very, very wisely. I mean, Devontae Adams may not have been a first-round pick, but he was a hell of a pick. He plays like a first-round pick.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all those years with Donald Driver and Jordy Nelson and Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley, right, and the host of running backs they've had. I don't care if they're not first-round picks. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill aren't first-round picks. I don't think Mahomes was too worried about where they got drafted. Right? It works. So I don't get into all that. George Kittle wasn't a first-round pick, but it worked out okay. I think in the end, are they or are they not good players? Is he surround? I think the bigger gripe he might have, and I would agree with him, is that the coaching has not been great up until LaFleur got there. I mean, look, McCarthy in the beginning, it worked very well. They win the Super Bowl, the 15-1 the following year. That thing got stale, and it was stale for a long time. Okay, and then McCarthy goes to Dallas, and you see that, okay, maybe it was stale for a reason. I get that argument. I don't get the argument that he hasn't had talent. They've been to the NFC Championship game a ton. They haven't won it, but you get to the NFC Championship game that often, you're pretty talented. Like, it's not just Aaron Rodgers there, and it just hasn't gone the way in those games that he wishes it would. Fair enough, but he's also had a hand in a couple of those.
And the most recent example of doesn't matter where you're drafted. Who the hell was Robert Tonyan? All of a sudden, he's playing on a Pro Bowl level at tight end for the Packers last year. Where the hell did he come from? Doesn't matter that he wasn't a first-round pick. I agree wholeheartedly with you on that one, Matt. All right, so is there any mending of the fences? Is too much bad blood got under this bridge? Can they resurrect the relationship between these two parties? Or is it a foregone conclusion that Aaron Rodgers will not play for the Packers again? Will he play for somebody else, or will he just be the full-time host of Jeopardy?
I think in his head, he's gone, but it doesn't really matter what is in his head because they have to trade him. And I've made this point, maybe even on your show, Jody. I'm not sure, but look, they don't have an owner. They're a very unique franchise. And a lot of franchises have that owner who's maybe in the GM's ear, team president's ear, saying, hey, look, we got to move on. It's a bad situation. Mark Murphy is a football guy. He played in the NFL for a long time. He's a football guy.
Yep.
Brian Gutekunst is a football guy. They don't care about the PR side of it like a lot of teams would with their ownership groups. And, by the way, they're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which for anyone who hasn't been there, okay, is a very, very small town with nothing else going on. Those fans are going to side with the team every single time. Okay, Brett Favre came back to Lambeau and got booed. Like they're gonna side. So the Packers have no real motivation to trade him. Even if you get back a big haul of draft picks, so what? You'll get that big haul of draft picks in February. Like it's not. There's no huge reason. If you're Rodgers, you want to try to use your leverage and hold out. You can. You're going to get fined. You're going to lose money. If you want to really go nuclear and retire, you have to give back $23 million worth of signing bonus. And then, by the way, you lose the $100 million left on your contract. To me, there is no way that's happening. So I look at this thing and say, I think he's really serious about being very angry there, but I don't think they're going to trade him. I really don't. I think they're going to dig their heels in and say, look, if you're going to play in 2021, you're going to play here. And he may pout and stomp his feet, but I think he's going to play there.
Matt, in a larger perspective, you look around the league. It's not just Aaron Rodgers. It was Russell Wilson, Seattle, Deshaun Watson, Houston.
Right.
Quarterbacks getting involved in personnel decisions or wanting to be involved or wanting to be in the process. Is that a good thing? Where did it start? I criticize coaches that want to be involved in personnel. There's not enough time in the day. I mean, at some point you have to delegate. You have to trust the people around you. Good organizations have that set up. The Packers have been a good organization for a lot of years. Seattle has, not Houston. So every situation is different. But where does this come from? Is this just a modern sort of athlete thinking that they should be involved in all pieces of the pie, so to speak?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes. I mean, look, the player empowerment side of things has really started in the NBA and it's taken root in the NBA. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of this in the NFL. But the reality is the NFL is a whole different animal. The NFL, a lot of these guys have non-guaranteed contracts once you get into the back half of the deals. The quarterbacks are the one position where those guys are going to have some power and influence in the front office because of how important they are, right? Like I remember it was a year ago. Chiefs flat out said they didn't like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. A big part of the reason they took him was Mahomes wanted him. But that was a big reason that they took Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now maybe they would have taken him regardless, but with Mahomes signing off, they did it. I think you're going to see more and more of that. However, I do think every situation is different. Like Deshaun Watson now, before all the legal stuff that has become ugly and very importantly public and front and center. Look, I get why he wanted out of there. That franchise is a dumpster fire. I totally understand why Deshaun Watson was like, look, I'm not going to get beat to hell behind this offensive line and win 3 games a year. I have no interest in doing that. If you're going to go down that route, trade me. However, with a guy like Russell Wilson, like, what is the complaint? I mean, I get it. Like, the offensive line hasn't been very good. If you want to say, hey, get me help on the offensive line, I'll hear that. I'll hear that argument. That's fine. You've been really good every year of your career. Like, you've been in the playoffs every single year, and it's not just him in that situation. They've had a very good defense most of his career. They've run the ball effectively most of his career. And then with Rodgers, obviously, we just talked about it. I do think quarterbacks, because of the salary they're paid and their importance in every single play of the game, they're going to have a say. But do you want your quarterback making personnel decisions? No, you don't. That's why you have an entire personnel department. I think most teams are going to kindly tell their quarterback that.
Matty, it's not just quarterbacks. It's wide receivers, too. And that's been a big story in the league for the last 48, 72 hours. Julio Jones and where he's going to be dealt, if he's going to be dealt. First things first, to help end a slight disagreement John and I have. I'll give you 3 wide receivers. I'll put them in order, alphabetically. Then you tell me the order that you would rank them going into the 2021 season. Devonta Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones. What order would you put them projecting to the upcoming season 2021?
Devonta Adams, probably Hopkins and Jones. And Jones only third because he was hurt last year and he's older.
Agreed. That's the exact. Well, I would put Hopkins 1. And I think Johnny Mack would put Julio Jones 1. You put Devontae 1.
Yeah. Whoa. You didn't say in 20. Julio's coming off an injury, as Matt said. I said Julio has been the best X receiver in football. Now, the red zone issues concern me over the years. But his performance, 5-time All-Pro, I gave you, the numbers historic. This is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think those guys have reached this level as a whole. Now, at 32, coming off the injury, if you're saying who's going to be best next Sunday, I might have a different answer. If he's healthy, though, he can still perform at that level. That's where I am with Julio.
Gotcha. The difference is was and is. I think you said he is the best wide receiver, which is different than he was the best wide receiver in football.
He could be.
Fair enough. We're splitting hairs.
Splitting hairs.
Matty, how is this going to shake out? Julio goes on a national television show yesterday, says, I'm out of here, to Shannon Sharp on the air about Atlanta. He might not be going to the Dallas Cowboys. We here in Philadelphia would love to see him be added to the Eagles. Just doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense. How's this going to play out in Atlanta?
I mean, I do think he'll be traded. And I'd love to know, did he know he was live on air when he said all that?
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
But no, listen, I think he's going to get traded. That seems to be the worst kept secret in football the last couple of months. That has been a marriage that's about to end. If you're the Falcons, it's kind of an odd time to end it. Like, you just drafted Kyle Pitts. Your whole hope of getting back to the playoffs is your offense, because that defense isn't driving the bus. So, that's a little bit odd, but they've been in cap hell for years. And it's one thing to be in cap hell. It's another thing to be in cap hell and be terrible. Right? Like, and I know you guys in Philadelphia have had some cap issues over the recent past, and that's fine when you're going to the playoffs and you're right in the mix every year. It's not so fine when you're winning 4 games.
Yeah.
And so Falcons now dealing with that. Look, I will say this. If I'm GM Terry Fontenot, who's a first-year GM, first real big trade he might be making here, I don't know that you can trade him for anything less than you've got to be thinking it's going to be a top 50 pick. Like, I've seen all this. Well, they're going to get a second-round pick. That seems to be the idea. Okay, I'll hear that. It better be an early second-round pick. Like, if you trade him to a contending team, if you trade him, just for an example, to the Bills, then that's got to be a first-round pick. Like, that can't be a second-round pick. It might as well be a third-round pick. So, I think that stuff all comes into play. Who's going to be interested? There's going to be a lot of teams that are kicking the tires on Julio Jones. Like, to stick with the analogy, if you're Buffalo and you think New England might try to get him, do you just say, hey, look, you know what? He's worth a second rounder. We can get him for a second rounder. For no other reason, it upgrades our team. It keeps him away from New England. I think, you look around, you mentioned it. Like, does he fit with the Eagles, for a variety of reasons? Maybe not. But I'll tell you what, they could use him in that receiver room. I mean, he'd be – and they got Take out the picks, although I don't think they're going to, like you said, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for them in the moment they're in. But there's going to be a ton of interest. I do think he'll get traded. And I'm sure if Atlanta can get into the AFC, they will. If I were the Chargers, I would be all over it. You've got Keenan Allen, you've got Mike Williams, got Justin Herbert. Like that, if you're going to beat Kansas City out, you better load up. And I would be very intrigued by Julio Jones in LA.
Matt, you mentioned the timing. That's what interested me with Atlanta. They know this has been going on. Why the dragging of the feet? Everybody's already budgeted. There's a lot of teams that have salary cap issues at this point, can't afford Julio Jones. So that, in theory, limits your potential pool of moving him. If you go all the way back to the draft, you make your decision and say, okay, we're going to go with Matt Ryan. We're going to go quarterbacks can play at a high level later in their careers.
Right.
So why not fix things? Because the strength of your team is Julio Jones, Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley. You're going to outscore people. The timing of this is what I struggle with.
So I think it's pretty much for one reason and one reason only, and that's because they have to trade him post June 1.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the financial side of if they were to go out and they were going to trade Julio Jones before June 1st, okay, I just pulled up in front of me, they'd be eating $23.2 million in dead money. They would not save a dime. Okay. Right. However, if they trade him post June 1st, they eat $7.7 million this year, but they save $15 million. So they drag their feet simply because they had to from a financial standpoint. Now you're right though. It limits what they can do and what they can get back. Like you're waiting a full year for those draft picks to mature, and a lot of teams don't have the money. Like the Giants, for example. Maybe the Giants would have been in. Well, they signed Kenny Galladay. Like you're not also going to go out and get Julio Jones. So you're right. There are some teams, that stay in that same stadium. The Jets went out and got Corey Davis. Maybe it's a lot harder now to get Julio Jones. I would have thought the Patriots, after spending $500 million or $250 million, would not have been in, but now apparently maybe so. It is limited, and it is going to hurt what they can get back. But they put themselves into cap jail with all the money they've spent, and now that they have to do it post June 1. And when you're forced into that situation, that makes it tougher. To go back quickly, the Aaron Rodgers, I think that also complicates things. Like they could not trade him until after June 1st. Like maybe if they could have traded him in March, they would have done it. They couldn't. So, the finances play a part in this. I think that's why it took so long here at Jones.
Matty, this week in the National Football League here in Philadelphia and the other 31 towns, teams are doing voluntary workouts. And we can talk about the whole negotiation between the Players Association and the teams. I want to cut to the chase. How is it going to impact the upcoming season? Will we have better play? Will we have lesser play? It is what it is. They're not exactly tackling this week. It's more drills and exercises and stretching than anything else. But it's not vertical. They are actually showing up, and they're getting big numbers in camp. Is it going to make for better play in the 2021 season, or still just lesser play because they've had to negotiate this out and keep the actual accomplishments kind of under wraps?
See, I don't think it's going to matter at all. OTAs to me, all this voluntary OTA stuff, mini camps, it's all just, look, it was all put in play originally to make sure guys didn't show up 30 pounds overweight to camp. That's really what it's there for. And it's there for teams like the Eagles this year, who have a first-year head coach, who have a young quarterback, who they can get every second they need to try to install things and get accustomed to each other before training camp. A lot of these things, if you're the Baltimore Ravens, like you don't need OTAs. You just don't. You could show up in August and it's fine, right? Like I firmly believe that. I think rookie mini camp is good. It helps these guys to get acclimated. That all said, I don't want to hear a word out of the players about the fact that the voluntary mini camps are a pain for them. Hey, look, you negotiated a CBA last year. Okay, you're not at the end of a CBA. You're at the beginning of a decade-long CBA. I was in Indianapolis asking a ton of people about the CBA a year ago, right as it was getting ratified. And you know what? They all signed off on it, or at least they had the majority sign off on it. Okay. And a lot of guys didn't even vote. So if you want to complain about it, you should take it up with DeMaurice Smith, and you should take it up with the heads of your players union, because you all signed off on this. Like, by the way, if they didn't want this, the owners wouldn't have fought them on this. They wouldn't have cared. It's all, the owners might have wanted a little bit of some concession back in some other way, just because that's the way negotiating works. But they wouldn't have fought hard on voluntary OTAs. It was just fine. These guys are running around in helmets and shorts. So it's not a big deal. And the teams that aren't going to show up are the teams that don't have big workout bonuses. Okay, any team like Green Bay that has a big workout bonus attached to their contract, they're all going to show up.
Yep.
It's an easy $50,000.
Except Aaron, but
Except
it was 500. Yeah. But it's interesting. You mentioned Baltimore. I agree with you. Veteran teams, not important. It's ironic, John Harbaugh. Nobody's been fined more over the years for tweaking things at OTAs than John Harbaugh. But I do want to bring you back to Philadelphia, Matt. And, Peter King said yesterday, I thought it was interesting. The biggest surprise in the NFL isn't over the last year, wasn't Tom Brady at 43 leading the Bucs to a Super Bowl. It's that Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz are out in Philadelphia. Just, we're used to it now. From a national perspective, how crazy is that to rewind a year and say, these guys are out of here?
Surprising. Very surprising. I grew up not that far from Philly. I grew up in New York, so I'm used to the big city and how quickly things can turn around. But that being said, the Eagles had never won a Super Bowl. And they won largely. I get Wentz was hurt in the end there. But, largely they won that Super Bowl because of Wentz. And then Peterson really had some of the gutsier calls you'll ever see in a Super Bowl, and they worked out. It all came up aces. A handful of years later, everybody's gone. Now, look, as that year unfolded, Wentz was atrocious. They had no choice, I think, but to go to Jalen Hurts. And I thought it was unfair of Wentz to be, maybe through back channels, but so publicly upset about the fact he got benched. Well, he deserved to be benched. They gave him a lot of rope last year, a lot of rope. And he could do nothing with it. I was more surprised that Peterson's gone. But it seems like that organization from the top down has had a lot of issues for a long time now. And look, Jeffrey Lurie has been a good owner for that franchise, giving them a lot of stability over the years. They've won a lot with Jeffrey Lurie being there. Howie Roseman has done some very good things there. He's done some things there that have made a lot of people, question his decision-making. But it seemed like it just wasn't working out. And that story in The Athletic, I thought, was very well reported. They did a great job kind of detailing all the issues that are going on. I think the Eagles with Sirianni here going forward, they're going to have to streamline this approach. But it was very surprising. It felt like everything kind of came to a head in that Week 17 game where the Eagles, did they tank? Did they not tank? It seemed like that really was just the impetus for Peterson being gone. Was that the truth? I don't know. I don't know that anybody truly knows, but it seemed as though that game changed a lot of things, even though really for the Eagles, it changed nothing other than a little bit of draft position.
Matty, so give us the national perspective. John and I here every single day. We're inundated with information and opinion about Jalen Hurts, the new quarterback. No one believes that the Eagles are targeting him as their quarterback for the next 5 years. If it plays out that way, so be it. But as of this moment, that's not necessarily in the plans. But they're going to give him the shot. Is he going to be good enough to hold it? Is he going to be good enough to become a top half of the NFL quarterback? Can he become a top 10 NFL quarterback? Off what you saw last year, what you thought of him at both Alabama and Oklahoma, what kind of quarterback is Jalen Hurts going to be in his NFL career?
I usually trend negative on these things, but I actually think he's going to be pretty good. I really do. And the reason is multi-layered, but I'll say quickly, look, I think it mattered to me that at Alabama, he ends up getting benched for Tua, and he didn't just pout and sulk. He was a really good teammate by all counts. He went to Oklahoma and played really well. I also think it matters. He played under Lincoln Riley, who a lot of people think will be an NFL head coach, and he played under Nick Saban, who is the basic godfather of college football coaching for the modern-day coach. So he played at two huge programs. He didn't knuckle under when things didn't go well. That's going to matter in Philly because things are occasionally not going to go well, and when they don't go well in Philadelphia, you better be able to take it. So he's proven he can take it. Like Tuscaloosa, if there's a college program that gets as much attention as a national football team, it's them. He dealt with it in a very, very public way, getting benched in the national title game. I also thought talent-wise, look, I do believe that you need to have a quarterback these days with some mobility to him. It's just, unless you're Tom Brady, like it helps, it matters. It's just the way the game's going. Not that you have to run for 1,000 yards, but you have to be able to get out of the pocket, make some plays. He can do that. He's got a really good arm. I thought he was thrust into a tough situation last year. And let's face it, with a team that was decimated, not a lot of receiving weapons. Now he gets Devonta Smith. Okay, Zach Ertz is back healthy. Will he get traded? Maybe, but for right now, he's there. They have Dallas Goedert as well. And a good offensive line. So I look at them and say, look, do I think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl? No. Do I think, though, that if Sirianni's a good head coach, that marriage could work? I do. I like what they're doing because they're giving Hurts the year. If it doesn't work out, you've got at least a couple of first-round picks. You can go out. You can get the quarterback of the future. If he does work out, then great, and you'll load it up with picks. So I think, and by the way, the Giants are the exact same thing. So I think both those teams did very smart things this offseason. They're giving their guy a run, and if it doesn't work out, they're well positioned to make it work out going forward with either another quarterback or, again, if it does go well, then they can add in a lot of weapons and get the team better quickly.
He delivered as promised. Matt Verderame, one of my favorite national football writers. Matt, appreciate you coming out with us. We will tap into your services again down the road. Before you know it, they'll actually have mandatory camps opening up. We'll get you back when they actually put some pads on. Thanks for helping us out today.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Matt Verderame from fansided.com, outstanding national football.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.